Hello, hello, hello. My name is Jill Osborne. I am the president and founder of the Interstitial Cystitis Network. It is indeed October 18th, 2018, and it's time to do a spontaneous IC support group meeting. Our normal support group meetings online are the first and third Sundays of every month at 12:30 Pacific time. However, I love to do drop-in meetings just to see who's on and to see if anybody is having any flares and anybody needs any help. So anyway, we are broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube right now. And I welcome the opportunity to take your questions. I also have some good freebies for you today. Hello, Debbie. It's very, very nice to see you. Hi, Roxanne. Very nice to see you too. Hope you're having a good IC day today. You know, it's really interesting. So in my family, IC is inherited. I'm IC subtype 5. So my grandmother, my aunt, my cousin, my sister, my mother, even my brother, even all sorts, that's the whole point of some of these subtypes, IC subtype 5. So what's interesting now is that my dad is 95. He is actually starting to experience what IC feels like because he's having trouble sleeping at night. And I feel really, really sorry for him. But I said to him, I said to him today, I hate to tell you this, Dad, but you're now experiencing what I went through for 20 years. And so IC has no boundaries. It can affect anybody of any race, any culture, any age. We've got young patients. We've got old patients. We've got wealthy patients. We have patients who are challenged economically. It knows no boundary. And that's why we are meeting today, because we want to come together as a group, despite all the other differences in the world, and try to give each other a little bit of support. Hello, Angel. Hello, Lucy. Hi, Justin and Sam. I'm sorry to hear that you're in PAM today. Hi, Betsy. Betsy on YouTube is asking for our phone number. Don't call right now because I'm not going to answer the phone right now. But if you're looking for the IC network number, it's 1-800-928-7496. We are the only IC group that actually answers the phone and takes your question. Many times you'll come right to me. People are always surprised. They're like, wait, you answer the phone? It's like, yeah, I answer the phone. I don't have a secretary. We have a grand total of, let's see, 5 employees of the IC network, and most of them are working in another building and not with me. All righty. So look at this. We've got 26 people on Facebook right now. We got a couple over here on YouTube. First of all, oh my God, do I have a great freebie for you. Oh. You know, I like starting these off with freebies. And I have got a great freebie for you. I will send you a sample of Desert Harvest Aloe if you would like it. So if you are interested in receiving 6 capsules of Desert Harvest Aloe to see if your body likes it, all you need to do is send me your mailing address. And I need you to send it to my email. And of course, I don't have it printed out. I keep saying I keep reminding myself to do it. Hold on, I got to write it down. I need you to send your mailing address to icnetwork@mac.com. And that's as a Macintosh computer. So if you would like a free sample of Desert Harvest Aloe, you need to send me your mailing address to icnetwork@mac.com. Now, I'm telling you right now, I don't do anything with your address. I don't add it to a database. You don't need to worry about receiving anything else from us. I'm literally just sending it to you. I throw it over in a little email file. That's all. icnetwork@mac.com. Not going to sell it. Not going to pitch you for anything, although I'm going to put in a one-page thing about the IC network. But other than that, you're just getting a freebie. Why? Because frankly, you deserve it. Seriously. You have never, you know what one of my favorite affirmations is for IC patients? you have never worked, let's see. Gosh, I want to give you the right context. A lot of patients really worry that they're going to make the same mistake, right? If you were diagnosed 20 years ago and a doctor suggested that you do something, or you had a test that was really, really painful, and you remember that fear, right? And so even though it's 20 years later and we've got different ways of doing testing and we've got better doctors, it's really easy to hold on to that fear and not want to do stuff. And one of the things that I really love to say to patients is, you have never been more prepared to handle whatever happens to you in this life than you are at this very moment, because you are truly one day older and one day wiser. So don't assume that just because something bad happened a decade ago or 5 years ago or even last year with respect to your IC care, don't assume that that's going to happen again, because ultimately you are the one who's responsible. You are the decision maker. The doctor doesn't pay you. You pay the doctor. You're the boss of your medical care. You're the one who should be making the fundamental decisions. When you're working with your doctor, they're giving you options. They're educating you. They're telling you what they can do. But then you as a patient need to come back out of that appointment, do some research, and then you call the doctor back and say, all right, this is what I would like to do. I see that often. I see patients become very subservient to their doctors, and I don't want you to be subservient to your doctors. I don't want you to be patient. I don't want you to be a patient. I want you to be a respondent. That's a responsible participant in your medical care. That means you're ready to kick some butt. When you're younger and you don't have a lot of self-confidence and you're wondering if somebody's going to believe you or not, it's really easy to walk into the doctor feeling very vulnerable, feeling like you're under their control. And ultimately, in the end, it's important that you remember that no doctor can tell you when you need to pee. You know when you need to pee. No doctor can tell you how IC feels. You're the one that knows how it feels because you have it. You have an important voice that deserves to be heard. And if you have a doctor who's not willing to listen to you, then it is time to look for another doctor. So I want you to be active. I want you to be informed. I want you to be strong. I want you to be powerful. I don't want you to walk into your doctor's office and burst into tears. I want you to walk into your doctor's office with a set of questions ready to go. Here's my medical. Here's my history. I'm here because I'm trying to figure out what's hurting. And let me give you another tip here. And then I have a little thing I want to do, and then we're going to take your questions, okay? But, I spend a lot of time with patients on the phone. Tons of time with patients on the phone. Almost every day I'm working with patients, good 5 or 6 hours a day. And in many cases, many of you are already under the care of doctors, and you're trying things, and you're not where you want to be. Your life is greatly impacted by your IC. And many of you will say, I've done everything. There's nothing else for me. And it's like, I double dare you to call me because I can prove that you have not tried everything. But when you call me, we're going to talk, before we even talk about treatments, we're going to talk about anatomy. We need to know what part of your body is triggering your symptoms. And again, now that we have the subtypes, now that we know that there are different types of IC, it's even more important for patients who were diagnosed 20 years ago and have only taken Elmeron and never got better. Okay, now we know why. So when you call me, I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions about your pain, okay, and your symptoms. As an example, you believe me, I do not want you to say it hurts down there. Okay, really, people, that doesn't work for me. It's like, where down there? Where does it work? Is it internal or is it external? That's the first thing we have to think about. Are you hurting inside your body, or are you hurting on your skin on the outside of your body? If you're hurting on your skin on the outside of your body, that tells me, if you're a woman, that in all likelihood, you probably have vulvodynia or genitourinary syndrome of menopause. Okay, so question number one, internal or external? So let's say you tell me it's internal. So I'm going to say, okay, where is it internal? Is it in your rectum? Is it in your vagina? Is it in your penis or your prostate? Or is it in your urethra? And you really have to think about that. Can you, in your brain, and as you're thinking and tracking your symptoms, can you differentiate where it's coming from? As an example, urethra pain is and a lot of guys will have urethral pain and pain referred to the tip of their penis. And women, especially those of us who are a little bit older, I'm sorry to say, we have some estrogen issues and we just don't have a good protective coating in our urethra. Urethral pain is very sharp at times. It's as you're peeing, it's like you go, ooh, it's like, oh my God, okay, wow, that really hurts. You know that pain if you've ever been catheterized or if you've ever had an installation. That's urethral pain, where they stick the catheter in, it kind of stretches your urethra, they put the medicine in, they pull it out, and the first time after you pee, it's like, oh, holy mother of what? Oh my God, that hurts so bad. Okay, that's urethral pain. Urethral pain tends to be very sharp. Bladder pain tends to be, let's see. Gosh, there's so many different ways of describing it. Your bladder is causing your pain if you have pain as your bladder fills with urine that is relieved by urination. So the fuller you get, the worse you feel. And as soon as you pee, there's a sense of, thank God. It's like, ow, okay, it's done. It's over. And here's a picture of a typical IC subtype 2 bladder wall injury, right? So what you see here are a lot of what we call petechial hemorrhages. They're basically little wounds. So think about it. If your bladder is filling with urine is going higher and higher and higher and higher and getting into these wounds. And that hurts bad sometimes. So the fuller you get, the worse you feel. And as soon as you pee, it's like, oh, thank God. Okay, why? Because urine is no longer touching those wounds. So bladder wall pain tends to be volume driven. It tends to be, patients describe it as ground glass. When you've got bladder wall pain, your day is really controlled by urine volume, obviously, because your bladder's pretty injured. So the fuller it is, the worse you get. When I had bladder wall pain, it felt like sharp nails on the inside of my bladder. It's very creepy that you're actually feeling your bladder. And that no one should normally feel that sensation. It's very, very odd. So to me, my bladder wall pain, it was like there were fingernails scratching down my bladder wall, or some people describe it as razor blades or ground glass. But anyway, so we know it's your bladder if it changes with volume, okay? Pelvic floor pain tends to be duller. It tends to be achier. It tends to have a burning quality to it because a muscle that's working hard is a muscle that builds up lactic acid. And lactic acid causes that burning sensation. So again, if you're calling me and we're going to talk about your IC, I'm really going to try to help you focus. Is it bladder wall pain? Is it pelvic floor pain? Is it urethral pain? Or is it rectal pain? Because rectal pain is often very tight pelvic floor muscles. So that's something that we can look at. And or is it hemorrhoids? The good old hemi. Oh, yes. Aren't we all familiar with the hemi? Myself included. And then the other thing is, when you're working with your doctor, Your ability to talk about the nuance of your symptoms is so important because, again, remember, they're taught to diagnose by observation, but you can't really see IC. So they're listening to you and they're trying to process what your symptoms are. So if you say, okay, I got frequency, urgency, I got some pain, they're like, okay, tough cookie. That's too bland. That's too simple. Instead, I need you to focus on your weird nuance pain. Like, do you ever have a vibration feeling? Like I have it right now sitting, okay? Because I just sat down for the day. I've been up and down all day. And I can feel a little tiny flickering in my left butt cheek about 2 inches to the left of my rectum, which is a very slight pudendal nerve entrapment. So do you feel any movement? Do you feel any fluttering? Do you have pain to the left? Do you have pain to the right? Is your pain low? Is your pain high? Let me give you an example. Okay. So here's my belly button. I don't want to show it to you because I'm fat right now. Okay. So here's my belly button, right? Here's my hip bone. Here's my hip bone. Here's my bladder. One of the things you might notice yourself doing is pushing in. It's like you walk around like this, right? So like, look, you just catch yourself and you're just like, you just kind of hold yourself right there. And sometimes when you push in right there, it feels better. Sometimes it feels better. And it turns out that's a pelvic floor spot. That's a common kind of pelvic floor tension point. So that also can be a sign of pelvic floor. So again, it's the nuance. Also, what triggers your pain? Does your pain start when you get in the car? Does your pain start after sex? Does your pain start before sex? Does your pain start during penetration if you're a woman? Or does your pain start when you ejaculate, when you're a man? Or does the pain start when you bend over? Or does your pain start when you lay flat on your back or you turn on your left side or your right side? I want you to take note of what triggers your pain. And I also want you to take note of the things that give you comfort, because that's all even more important than your typical voiding diary as you're working with your doctor, because that little flickering, that's like pudendal nerve entrapment, okay? Tight pelvic floor muscles. If you're having a little clitoral pain, a painful arousal sensation, that's going to be a pudendal nerve entrapment. Also, kind of, we call it persistent genital arousal disorder. Nothing to be embarrassed about. It happens all the time. Happened to me. It lasted about 6 weeks and then it was gone. It's totally freaky. So again, be prepared to talk about nuance. All right. Okay, now, so one of you have just asked, so guys, your freebie for today, for coming to my meeting today, is a free sample of Desert Harvest aloe vera. Now, I got a whole bag here. I think I have about 50 right here, but I've got more up in my warehouse, so I can get more if we have more people. If you want a free sample of Desert Harvest aloe vera, then I need you to send me your name and address to icnetwork@mac.com. That is my super secret email address. All right, so I did have one other thing I want to talk about before we start taking your questions. And I see lots of really, really good questions in here. So hold those questions just for a moment. I wanted to very, very quickly go over the top 10 foods that will irritate IC subtype 1, IC subtype 2, or IC subtype 5. Hunner's lesions, bladder wall driven, central sensitization. If you're IC subtype 3, pelvic floor, IC subtype 4, pudendal neuralgia, maybe diet is not going to be that big of a deal for you. And that explains why some people don't react to diet, because you have a different subtype. But if you've got Hunner's lesions, if you've got bladder wall driven, if you've got central sensitization, diet management is going to be helpful for you. So what are the top things that we know are going to irritate somebody with those subtypes? Number 1, caffeine. Caffeine is a diuretic. It triggers more frequent urination, and it causes urine to become more concentrated with urea and ammonia. Hello, it hurts. You would not put caffeine on a wound on your hand, especially an exposed nerve. Please don't do that to an icy body. Number 2, acidic foods. Now, y'all know that. Citrus juices, cranberry vinegar, orange juice, lemonade, limeade, cranberry juice, all those things we know are too acidic and they're going to irritate your bladder. Number 3, alcohol. In our survey, where the IC Network was the only one who did a major survey on wine, beer, spirits with IC patients. And what we know is that 95% of patients usually have some alcohol sensitivity, although there are workarounds. Obviously, if you're in a wicked flare, we don't want you to do any alcohol. Seriously, not the time to put alcohol in an open wound. But if you're starting to feel better and you're ready to try a beer, you got to start with a pale ale. Pale ales are much better than a heavy brown beer. If you're going to do a spirit, you need to stick with sake or vodka rather than a brown spirit like whiskey. If you're going for a wine, you need to stay away from the champagnes. The champagnes are really acidic and irritating. Man, there was a time where even if I had a sip of champagne, it caused me a really wicked flare. You want to go for a low acid wine, which is going to be maybe a Merlot if you like red wines, or a Chardonnay if you like white wines. Do it on ice, drink a lot of water to dilute the alcohol, use your pre-leaf, etc. if you're going to do something like that. Number 4, the fourth thing that we know is going to hurt IC subtype 1, subtype 2, subtype 5 is potassium. Potassium chloride is a salt. Sodium chloride is a salt. One of the ways that we diagnose IC, to determine if you have a damaged bladder, is putting a salt in your bladder, also known as potassium chloride. Hurts like hell if some of you have had a KCL test. So we find that there are some people who are more potassium sensitive, but it takes a lot of potassium to really trigger that. Ironically, bananas are high in potassium, and yet in the IC research studies, bananas are actually remarkably IC friendly. I eat bananas all the time, but some of you might be potassium sensitive. Number 5, foods that are high in histamine. If you have allergies, you struggle with allergies, and or you struggle with mast cell activation syndrome, you're going to want to avoid foods that are high in histamine, like chocolate and red wine and things like that. And the odds are your allergist or your doctor's already told you what to avoid. Number 6, artificial sweeteners. Please, 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 my friends, do not do artificial sweeteners when you have a wound in your bladder. There is so much research missing with respect to the long-term adverse events related to artificial sweeteners. Though I just saw a study, I think 2 weeks ago, where they were able to prove that the use of artificial sweeteners actually damaged the human bowel biome. The thing about NutraSweet, also known as aspartame, is it's metabolized into formic acid, a precursor to formaldehyde, and is devastating to an IC bladder. If you look at the FDA approval for NutraSweet, you will see bladder irritation. It's a known side effect. So we need you to stay away from artificial sweeteners. Number 7, MSG, nitrates, nitrites, and nitrates. In other words, junk food. Foods like pepperoni, salami, heavily preserved meats. If you're going to do foods like that, please do uncured, so we can stay away from the nitrites and the nitrites, and always make sure that you get something that is MSG free, monosodium glutamate, sodium. It is sodium. Sodium on a wound hurts. Number 8, traditional vitamins and some supplements. Why? I will tell you, as an IC patient, I've never been able to take a Centrum or a one a day or any of those. Every time I did it, I will tell you, I had a wicked flare. Okay, why do we flare? Because their source of vitamin C is usually citrus fruit. And it's that citric acid that is the most irritating. We do have a low acid multivitamin for people who need a vitamin. I take this a couple of times. I don't believe in taking vitamins every day at all. But I believe in, if you're not eating well, like last week, I had a bad bowel thing for several days and really was barely eating. And I did take a couple of vitamins. So this is a low acid vitamin you could potentially try if you find yourself flaring with regular vitamins. Number 9. I'm going to break some hearts here, but it's chocolate. Chocolate. Chocolate contains several ingredients which can exacerbate IC symptoms: theobromine, caffeine, phenylethylalanine, tannins, and oxalates. Chocolate is well known for triggering migraine headaches, and many patients have reported flares from eating chocolates, especially cheaper milk chocolates. If you're going to do a chocolate, number 1, you're safe with a white chocolate. And you can try the more expensive dark chocolates for purity. Those might be better, but try to stay away from the cheaper milk chocolate products because they just tend to be a lot junkier. And if you're a chocoholic and you just can't do it, like for me, I will tell you, if I eat chocolate, I have bowel spasms for days. It's like from the moment that chocolate lands in my stomach until the moment it is released from my body, wherever that chocolate is touching my gut, I have violent cramping of my bowel. Violent. Bend over and screamers for days. That's why my body interprets chocolate as poison. However, I can eat carob no problem. And we have fabulous carob products that we sell in the IC Network store for those of you who are chocoholics. And last but not least, only for some of you, not for all of you, gluten might actually be a bit of an irritant. And it is something, I mean, obviously, if you're celiac positive, you already know you're going to have to avoid gluten. But it's always worth playing for a week or two with foods that are high gluten versus foods that are gluten-free, just to see how you feel. I feel better gluten-free by far. I am celiac negative. If I eat a lot of gluten, I swell up like a suck pig, and I don't feel good. That's why you couldn't pay me to eat cereal. I don't eat white bread. I eat a little tiny bit here and there, and it's usually fresh made organic. I do not go for traditional mother's cookies, box cookies, crackers, things like that. If I do those, I always feel worse. Okay, so it's always worth playing a little bit with gluten foods and just seeing how you do. Listen, if your bladder it stays the same. Okay, let me take that back. If you cut out gluten for 2 weeks and your bladder is better, then that's fairly compelling. But if you take out gluten for 2 weeks and you feel worse, then maybe you need the gluten. I know I cannot go completely gluten-free. Like last week I couldn't because I'd had the runs for several days with this stupid GI thing. And I just had to start throwing some traditional white bread in there to get things to calm down, and it worked. But for the most part, I tend to stay away from white flour. All right. So those, my friends, are your top 10 most irritating foods for the bladder. You can find that list right on our website. Our website is ic-network.com. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jill Osborne. I'm the founder of the IC Network. I started it 25 years ago. I'm the longest serving IC support group leader in the United States. I have 3 college degrees, a degree in chemistry, a degree in pharmacology, and a master's degree in psychology. Of course, I really didn't understand why I had those degrees until IC happened. Turned out to be a perfect combination for running the IC Network. We are rated number 1 in the world by the University of London and Harvard Medical School for the accuracy of our website, reliability, accuracy, credibility, etc. So if you're looking for really good information on IC, please come on over to the IC Network. All righty, let us take your questions. And again, sometimes my computer lets me go through them and sometimes it doesn't. Please don't be offended if I miss your question. Feel free to ask it again. We already have 80 comments on Facebook. And we have some questions down on YouTube, not as many. So let's go ahead and start with the Facebook one. And I can already see it's not letting me see some of them. Christy says, what if urethral pain that burns? Oh, okay. Hold on a sec. Christy, I want to try to understand your question. Your question is, what if urethral pain that burns if your bladder is full or empty and the burning ring of fire when you pee? Okay. So on our website, I have a blog called The 7 Causes of Urethral Pain. I want you to go over to our website and I want you to search for that. Urethral pain is how do I want to say this? How do you differentiate between IC and an infection? IC usually doesn't cause urethral pain. Infections do. So whenever somebody has the burning, what did you call it? You had a great way of calling it. If your urethra is on fire, the very first thing you need to do is you need to rule out infection, because that is a hallmark symptom of UTI. The second thing that we want to look at is, if you're a woman, hormone level. The urethra, if you are over the age of 40, then you are going to be entering perimenopause and working your way up there. What that means is your estrogen levels are changing and dropping. What that means is that your body, because you don't have as much estrogen, is not producing that nice normal protective coating that we expect to see. Thus, your urethra becomes much more vulnerable to irritants. So that would be something else to look at. Another thing that we see with urethral pain is chemical injury. If you're washing your underwear in Cheer or Tide or strongly scented detergent, if you're using a fabric softener, if you're using laundry sheets, if you're using Irish Spring or Dial soap, really, really strong soaps, those are really notorious also for causing urethral irritation. There are some other causes too. You can find those over on our website if you read that blog, The 7 Causes of Urethral Thing. So let's keep going. Brenda says she holds her tummy all the time. You make bruises where you push in. Me too. That's yeah. my first 2 years with IC, 3 years with IC, I walked around that way. And last year after my surgery, oh my God, I walked around that way for another year. I still do that occasionally. I had a hysterectomy, for those who didn't know that, for early uterine cancer. Janice says, my frequency is horrible. If I drink water, I'm in the bathroom for hours. Well, girl, hon, you gotta drink water. If you stop drinking water, your urine is getting super concentrated and it's getting more irritating. Okay, so it's normal for patients to kind of stop drinking everything because you don't want to pee. And there is a downside to that. The downside to that is you're allowing your urine to get darker and more concentrated and more acidic and more irritating. And actually, it can also start to form stones and crystals. Your urine is meant to be dilute. If your urine is a pale, clear yellow, you are perfect. If your urine is dark yellow or brown, you are dehydrated and you need to drink water. If your urine is clear, you're drinking too much water and you're potentially messing up your electrolytes. Okay. Oh, come on, computer. Your comments are go by so fast. I'm seeing some of them. Haley says, can you have more than one subtype? Absolutely. I'm IC subtype 5, IC subtype 3 primary, IC subtype 2 secondary. What that means is I have central sensitization that is inherited. It is not a disease. I have pelvic floor dysfunction like nobody's business on my left side, and occasionally my bladder acts out, not very often these days. Karen says, can coffee and tomatoes kill you? Yeah, that's because you either have Hunner's lesions or bladder wall driven, or maybe a little bit of central sensitization. Haley says coffee is hell. Absolutely. I can get away with decaf coffee every now and then. If I start doing it every day, what'll happen is within about 2 weeks, it's like all the nerves in my pelvis gets turned on. And then I've triggered myself a lot of neuroinflammation, and it's going to get me months to calm it down. And that's what I did last year during our fires and evacuation. I had coffee almost every day for 3 months. By last December, I was a wreck, and my resolution for 2018 was no Starbucks, unless I did something I really deserved, really hard, which I did. So I've earned 2 Starbucks this year, and I've had them, but I think about it every day. Shaw says, can IC go into remission? Absolutely. Absolutely. We can use the word cure for some subtypes now. That's what Dr. Christopher Payne argued when he proposed his 5 subtyping system. He said it's very unfair to tell patients IC is an incurable bladder disease. We don't think of IC as an incurable bladder disease anymore. What we think about it is as a pelvic pain syndrome. Why? Because other organs are involved. So if you have Hunner's lesions, can Hunner's lesions resolve? Yes, we have a treatment that does that, Lyris, that Hunner's lesions are known for coming back. If you have bladder wall driven, the question then is, can the bladder heal? And the answer is yes, the bladder can heal as long as we know what the irritant is. I mean, and that's really one of the things you've got to remember is that the human body is wired to repair itself. If you fell and skinned your knee, you'd have a scab on it tomorrow. That it is hardwired at a moment's notice to start fixing any damage that it finds. The challenge is we get in the way in many, many ways. Life in 2018, especially with our diet that's high in acids and coffees and sodas, make it a lot harder for a wound in the bladder to heal. There are some patients who, as an example, let's think about a chemotherapy patient. If you have chemo-induced cystitis, you have short-term chemical injury of the bladder wall. Will that heal? Probably. If you pour acid on it every day, will it heal? No, it won't. So, I mean, and there are subtypes. So there are little variations of bladder wall injury that are all different. So could you have a viral infection? That's not curable, but viruses go into remission. Could you have Lyme disease, a little chronic infection of your bladder wall? Yes, that's very hard to get rid of if you've got long-term chronic Lyme disease. Do you have a superficial injury of your bladder wall from drinking too much coffee? Yes. Will that heal? Probably, if you get out of the way. Okay. IC subtype 3, pelvic floor injury. That's a subtype. That's our largest subtype. And that's what Dr. Payne argues is the most curable subtype. And I can attest to that. You know, when I got my degree in pharmacology, I had a rare surgical internship. I did surgery for a year. And if there's one thing I remember from those surgical rounds that I did, is that muscle is amazingly responsive and pliable. If you have a muscle injury, when you work with that muscle, muscles generally respond well. The challenge is for some patients is we know you've got pelvic floor driven. Okay. How do we know that? You go to the physical therapist. The physical therapist does an exam, touches something, and it hurts badly. Now, what do you do as a patient? You go, oh, hell, man, I don't want to go back and be hurt again. I'm not going back to that physical therapist. And your pelvic floor just sits there getting tighter and tighter. I look at it a completely different way. If a physical therapist can put his or her finger on your pelvis and trigger pain, that is a giant success. Huge success. Because that means somebody's touched it. It means they found it. It means they found the source of your pain. That's incredible news. That is the best news ever. But now what you do is you go back to that physical therapist and say, all right, here's the spot, but we need to go really slow because that hurt like hell. And again, you control your appointment because you're the boss. You speak out and you tell them. So is pelvic floor dysfunction curable? In many patients, Dr. Christopher Payne argues, yes, it is. IC subtype 4, pudendal neuralgia, is a nerve injury, usually from very, very tight pelvic floor muscles. This is a little bit trickier because once nerves are injured, they're pretty hard to get to calm down. I have a partial pudendal nerve entrapment in my left butt cheek that is vibrating right now. It will trigger when I sit too long, so it is my job to get my tush up out of that chair, which I will be doing and probably sitting on that ball right back there sooner rather than later in this chat. But nerves heal too, but they're just a lot harder. And the thing with pudendal nerve entrapment is the number one most important thing for you to do is to stop whatever it is that's triggering that pain. So if you are sitting for long periods of time, you need to stop doing that or adapt or change or get a sit-stand desk or whatever. I see subtype 5, central sensitization. That is my core subtype. Because that is inherited, that is not curable. because that is the gift of our ancestors. Sensitivity is not a bad thing. Sensitivity is a good thing, at least for our lineage. And I've talked about this in other our lectures here. My family comes from Norway and Sweden. I'm 95% Norwegian or Swedish. And if we go back 5,000 years, what were my ancestors eating 5,000 years ago by the Arctic Circle? World's blandest diet. They were eating fish, they were eating whale, they were eating seal, they were eating deer, they were eating berries, they might have been eating salt, maybe a little apple, maybe. That's it, world's blandest diet. So we can argue very successfully that one reason why my body as a whole might be as more sensitive to foods is simply because my ancestors were not exposed to the foods and my body has not had the opportunity to build defenses to those foods. Like chocolate, which comes from Africa, or like tea, which comes from Asia, or like coffee, which comes from Latin America. So the central sensitization is the one where we're gonna have to back up and say we have to look at this differently. We don't look at that as a disease in any way, shape, or form, and we have to understand our lot. I mean, I don't see sensitivity as being a bad thing at all because we're the ones who are going to smell the fire. We're the ones who are going to save people. The world needs sensitivity. We need more sensitivity on this planet. We need more sensitivity. One of the best parts about having sensitivity, and let me just say this, I want to do a little rant. You know, one of the real cruelties that happens in this world is to a young child who is sensitive. Because what do you say? You say, "Oh, come on, just get over it. You're sensitive." But if you have central sensitization, what it means is that you have nerves that are easier to turn on. They have a lower sensory threshold. So I can wear cotton, but I can't wear wool. It hurts. It drives me crazy because my nerves have a higher threshold. And I think it's really, really important that when you see a child who has sensitivity, you embrace them and tell them that they're a gift, but that we have to all learn we all have to find what our body likes and what our body doesn't like. That's part of adulthood, in lack of a better term. Anyway, I can talk about that more later, but I hope that kind of answered your question. Okay, let's go back to some of your questions. Shaw says she suffered since the age of 3, seems to be doing really good. Awesome, girl. Awesome. I'm really, really glad to hear that. Or I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you're a girl or not. If you were a guy, I totally apologize for that. I can't tell from your picture because your picture is real small. Jamie, my urologist gave you no diet information. I had to Google everything. Not surprising at all. And luckily, you know, the best time to have IC is 2018 compared to 25 years ago or 40 years ago. 40 years ago, patients were committed to mental hospitals. And that's really interesting. IC was discovered, the first historical report was in Britain in the 1800s, like 1830, 1840. It was validated when they created the cystoscope around 1920. That was when Guy Hunter identified Hunter's ulcers in bladders. Then we go through World War II. We had our first research studies that showed that men had IC, that children had IC along with women. And then in 1952 or in the early 1950s, that's when a bad thing happened because we had a couple of doctors write a case report of an IC patient with bladder pain that they claimed was unexpressed anger manifested in the pelvis. And they suggested psychiatric care. And from about 1952 until literally 1980, most medical schools taught that IC was emotional. And it wasn't until the U.S. National Institutes of Health created new diagnostic standards for IC in 1987 that started to change. And now I will tell you that the U.S. government has invested more than $100 million studying IC. They would not have done that. They would not have invested money in urology studies if this was a mental disorder. It is not a mental disorder in any way, shape, or form. Okay? Alrighty. Janice says, your doctor says you have overactive bladder. Well, actually, in our summer IC Optimist, I reviewed the research studies from the American Urology Association this year that happened in May. And one of these studies was overactive bladder and interstitial cystitis may be a continuum of bladder sensitivity. And those were researchers in Tennessee. And I would say that generally, that's what most people think, is that if you've got frequency urgency, that's an early sign that the nerves in the bladder wall have been irritated. These are the nerves in the bladder wall. And a diagnosis of interstitial cystitis means that a different nerve group, the C fiber nerves, the pain nerves, have been turned on. Overactive bladder is a new condition. It was created by a marketing company creating TV commercials for incontinence. Remember the gotta go right now commercials? So the term overactive bladder almost was a marketing term. Then they paid some doctors to do some research, and they created this new multi-million-dollar market for their overactive bladder products. However, back in that time, we all thought overactive bladder was pretty much just mild IC. Now, we can debate that. There are some subtle differences, but for the most part, that's what this research study found, was that they believed it was just a sensitivity continuum. Diana, she takes prenatal vitamins even though you're 55 and it doesn't make you flare up. Diana, then what that tells me is your bladder wall's in pretty good shape if you're able to do that, because most patients with a bladder wall damage would not be able to do that. You might be IC subtype 3 pelvic floor, or your bladder wall might be very healed, very healthy and very healed. A Hunter's lesion patient certainly would not be able to do that without bawling their eyes out every night. An active Hunter's lesion. Paula can't look at chocolate anymore. And we've got people saying wine is bad. I can get away with Merlot. I always dilute it with ice, and I never drink a whole glass. I can do some sips every now and then. Ginny said you recommended somebody to our website and it was down. You know, our website has been up and active for about 6 months without a minute down. What was probably down was some sort of connection in the pipeline to our website from her. Jen, does IC go hand in hand with fibromyalgia? Not for all patients, but for some patients, there is certainly a connection between fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, Sjogren's syndrome, irritable bowel. You know, remember we kind of talk about these subtypes. So we certainly know that in the central sensitization subtype 5, we see systemic sensitivity. We see a sensitive stomach. We see a sensitive gut. We see a sensitive bladder. We see a sensitive vulva. We see a sensitive rectum. We see sensitivity everywhere. So that's kind of one clear, distinct subtype. But then we've also got this connection with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, Sjogren's syndrome, lupus, that are all kind of autoimmune diseases, variants of an autoimmune disease. IC by itself does not meet autoimmune standards, and it doesn't meet the full definition for autoimmunity, but clearly there is a small subtype where that is a connection for some, but not all patients. Haley asks, can nerve blocks help with IC pain? Well, it depends on if you know where your pain is. If you've got partial pudendal nerve entrapment like I do, yeah, they can do a nerve block for sure. If you've got persistent genital arousal disorder, yes, they can block the nerve that causes that. But if you've got pelvic floor pain, no. If you've got Hunter's lesion pain, no. Although I'm going to take that back. They could potentially do a nerve block at the spinal cord to kind of block pelvic pain in general. But if you're looking for localized, when I think nerve block, I'm thinking localized pain. Can I turn off that little nerve shoot that's compressed? And that's where I had my nerve blocks. So there are local nerve blocks versus nerve blocks at the spinal cord. Ruth Ann says, how can you call me? You can call me right here. That's a phone number. Or you can sign up for a coaching session. I'll tell you with phone calls, it's first come, first serve. I usually start taking the phones around 11 a.m. Pacific time, usually stop answering them about 5 p.m. You can usually get through almost all the phone calls, but sometimes it might be a 24-hour delay depending upon what else is going on. But I try to call everybody back. Wellness coaching sessions come first, though. And so if it's real urgent or you want to spend a lot of time, like an hour or more talking about it, or you want me to help you prepare for a doctor's appointment, then you might want to sign up for a wellness coaching session instead. Just go to the front page of our website and there's a link to it and you can see what that does. But, I work 90% of the patients that I work with, I just work with over the phone and they don't pay anything. But if you want to spend a lot of time, I want you to sign up for a coaching session, if at all possible. Christy says, all your bladder tests came back negative for infection, so you were told you had IC. Well, that's fair. So generally, in a diagnosis of IC, as they're working through the diagnostic process to try to figure out why your bladder is hurting, they're going to rule out other things. So they're certainly going to rule out infection. You probably all been tested for every sexually transmitted disease known to man, even if you were a virgin. And that's just their due diligence. That's what they want to do. So they might also do a urine cytology test to see if, to rule out cancer, especially if you were a smoker. They might do allergy testing. They might do food sensitivity testing. But if they cannot come up with any other potential cause for your bladder pain, that is when interstitial cystitis comes out. And generally, when you go to a doctor with IC for the first time, what they're going to do is rule out those tests. Then they're going to hand you the diet. They're going to give you IC step 1, maybe some step 2 treatment suggestions, send you on your way for 3 months and have you come back. Most patients actually respond really well to diet modification, the over-the-counter supplements, maybe a couple of oral meds. But if after those 3 months, you're not any better, you're getting worse, or you're bleeding, or there's anything else that's deeply concerning, you always go back to the doctor, and that's when they're going to want to take a look in your bladder, see if they've missed anything. There's a very distinct difference between Europe and the United States. In Europe, any patient who is suspected of having IC is always required to have a hydrodistension because they do a biopsy and they look for specific pathology results, because in Europe they have 16 potential subtypes of IC. In America, we don't do that. And we don't do that, number one, because we somewhat disagree with that system. But number two, our health insurance companies will not pay for that. Number three, labs are not necessarily educated to be able to do the type of intense testing that Europe does. And number four, and most importantly, it's pretty traumatic to the patient to have a hydrodistension. Especially in the early days, 20, 30 years ago, hydrodistensions were really traumatic because they really stretch your bladder. And many patients who went to that had a terrible reaction, never went back to their urologist. And there are probably some of you in this chat right now who are so traumatized you never went back. Well, in 2018, our diagnostic guidelines for IC are focused on reducing patient trauma. So we don't want to do an invasive test unless there's a really good reason why. And that means your diagnosis is in doubt. I also really come from a position that I don't like guessing. I like the facts. If I'm in pain and that pain lasts for longer than a week, I want somebody to look at it and tell me why I'm in pain. Now, would they do that for IC? No. But eventually, if your pain is persisting and or if you are not responding to treatment, you definitely probably want somebody to look in your bladder just to make sure they didn't miss anything. I'll give you two examples of why that's so important. One was a patient who had consistent IC symptoms for a long time. She was afraid to have the test. When she finally let them look in, they found a giant kidney stone, a calcium oxalate kidney stone with very sharp edges floating around in her urine, cutting her bladder wall. It had been in there for years. And when they broke it up and got it out, guess what? Her symptoms went away and her bladder healed. Another patient that I worked with, her symptoms started after a hysterectomy. And it took about 2 years, but when they actually went back in and looked in her bladder, they found that her bladder was perforated by an old stitch. And when they removed the stitch, her symptoms went away. Her bladder healed and her symptoms went away. So there are clearly good moments when it is important to let somebody look in your bladder. Tanya asked me, do I think IC is an autoimmune illness? The answer is no. For the vast majority of patients, no. But as I just explained, I do think in the bladder wall driven subtype, there is a subtype that is autoimmune, but I think it's very small. And according to the old research, when we were talking about related conditions, 3 to 5% of patients would have lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or Sjogren's syndrome. And I think that that's a really good, accurate representation of a very small group of patients who might have some autoimmune stuff that's going on. Tiffany says, I was told IC makes my immune system weak. Is that true? I don't think that's true. I'd like to see some data behind that. I don't think my I'm an IC patient for sure. Is my immune system weak? Absolutely not. I haven't had a cold or the flu in 15 years. Matthew says, your primary symptoms always been urethral burning, that you're trying the microgen test. Good. I think that that's very good, Matthew, because, for men, you also have to deal with the fact that you've got a prostate wrapped around your urethra and entering into your urethra. And you could have a chronic small, what we call fastidious infection in your prostate that is just constantly irritating down there. And that might be a trigger for your urethral burning. Remember too, though, now there's something else that's worth thinking, because I was working with a patient a couple days ago. When I was in 7th grade, I had frequency urgency. And when, and they said I had infection, and I remember having to swallow 10 big white sulfa pills when I was in 7th grade. It was over Christmas. And I remember I kept running to the bathroom Christmas morning. But after that, I had a very narrow urethra. They called it urethral syndrome. And it was like peeing through a needle. My little pee stream was this little tiny pee stream. So what did they do back then is they would pry your urethra open with a dilator. And I had about 100 urethral dilations between 7th grade and when I was a senior in high school. We did it once a week, and then we moved to once a month, and yada, yada, yada. Today, we don't do those dilations anymore, because now doctors are asking a far more important question, and that is, why is a urethra narrow and why is the urethra potentially burning? And the answer, here's your urethra, here's your pelvic floor, bam, if your pelvic floor is spasming, that's going to reduce the diameter of your urethra. It's going to make it a lot harder for urine to come out of your urethra. And that also, remember, a tight muscle builds up lactic acid and causes a burning sensation. So that's the other thing, Matthew, that you've really got to get checked out, is what is going on with your pelvic floor, and is your pelvic floor potentially contributing to that burning sensation? Okay. Hi, Bella. Caitlin says, what have you heard about artificial dyes in IC? This is one of my worst triggers. Caitlin, over on our website, we have a diet column called Fresh Taste by Bev Lauman. Beverly Lauman is the author of the book A Taste of the Good Life, which is the first book ever written on diet and IC. And let's see. Here it is. So many of you old timers, this would have been the first book you ever got for IC. Anyway, over on our web. Oh, and by the way, she's working on a brand new book. We've been after her for about a decade to do it. Bev Lauman, I am telling, she was the Orange County IC support group leader. I was in Northern California IC support group leader. We become very, very good friends. It is my opinion that Bev Lauman is in all likelihood the most scientifically knowledgeable IC patient in the world. Her knowledge, she was on her way to a PhD in biochemistry, I think, when her IC hit. Like I was on my way for a PhD in psychology. Anyway, whenever I have a question on food and diet and chemicals and dyes, I come to her. And so anyway, Caitlin, getting back to your question, there is a article on our website in her area, her Fresh Taste by Bev area, that talks about dyes. And yes, it can be a very, very big trigger. Paula says, why do not more people have a urostomy? Well, because for number one, it's incredibly traumatic surgery. Surgery is it's IC step 6 treatment. It's a treatment step 6 protocol. Now that we have the subtypes, now we know why surgery is not necessarily helpful for some patients. Now, if you've got Hunner's lesions and your bladder has gotten very small and shrunken and is in terrible shape, yes, bladder removal, cystectomy, whatever might be reasonable. But if you've got pelvic floor dysfunction, the last thing we want to do is do surgery, remove your bladder, and traumatize your muscles more. So the gift that we have with this subtyping is we are able to point patients to the correct treatment for their specific presentation of IC. And urostomy and or cystectomy really rarely used unless that bladder is very small and very damaged. We have a bladder removal board on our website run by an IC patient who had her bladder removed, that if anybody wants to learn from the horse's mouth what that's like, you can come on over to our website, go into our support forum, and there are 50,000 members to our support forum. The original Facebook for IC is over on our IC network. It is still active today, run by IC support group leaders, very accurate, very reliable, and that's where you can ask questions on that. And I want to say, I was stunned one day on Facebook when a patient asked a whole bunch of other patients if she should have her bladder removed. Guys, please, please, please don't make a decision on that based upon what you might learn through social networking. You need to really talk to an expert, talk to your doctor. You can call the IC network. We would be happy to try to give you a credibility test and a reality test for why that might be an option or might not be an option, but ultimately you're going to be working with your doctors big time on that. But you can't take advice from other patients who don't have that solid understanding of anatomy and physiology and bladder disease. Marianne says, your doctor told you that IC's in your head, you have no pain, my brain just thinks I'm in pain. Oh, that's so infuriating. Well, Marianne, it comes right down to your subtype. What is your subtype? If you have Hunner's lesions, that is not in your head. That is in your bladder. It is nerves in your bladder wall that are incredibly inflamed. If you have bladder wall injury, if your bladder looks like this, that is not in your head. It is obviously not in your head when your bladder looks like that. And what I like to say to doctors, if it's in my head, why is my bladder bleeding? Seriously, why is my bladder bleeding if you're telling me it's all in my head? If you have tight pelvic floor muscles, that is not in your head. You have sustained at some point in time a pelvic floor muscle injury. If you have pudendal neuralgia, that is not in your head. You have a nerve that is being compressed somewhere. If you have central sensitization, yes, that means your nervous system is more sensitive. Does that mean that it's all in your head? Hell no. It means you have lower thresholds. And I find that very offensive that a doctor would say that to you. And I would suggest that you find another doctor. That is just, that must be an older doctor who went to medical school prior to 1978. And guys, I apologize. I just can't scroll back. Sometimes it can let me scroll back to the beginning and sometimes it can't. And so if I missed your question, please ask it again in your chat. Okay, let me go down here to YouTube for a moment. Hello, YouTube. My YouTube screen is down here. So when I'm looking here, I'm looking at YouTube. When I'm up here, I'm looking at Facebook. And I have a cut on my finger if you're wondering what that Band-Aid is. Mel says, what can help with hormonal flares? Crying with my heating pad right now. Even Desert Harvest doesn't do anything with hormonal flares. Ovulation week and the few days before your period. Thank you. Well, okay. So the good news here, Mel, is you know it's a hormone flare. You know that it's short term. You know that it will go away as your hormone levels stabilize. So that should be, that gives you more control than you might realize. You know, one of the things that I see patients do is when we have a flare, we panic. You panic. We call it the runaway train. It's like, oh my God, I'm having a flare. What if it never goes away? Oh, this is it. My whole life, I'm going to be in pain, that's us catastrophizing, right? That's not real. That's just how anybody reacts to pain. But with a hormone flare, you know that that's absolutely not true because it will go away when your hormones stabilize. So you have to learn, number one, to step off the runaway train. It's like you got to say to yourself, all right, it's a hormone flare. I totally get it. I got my flare toolkit. So what's in my flare toolkit? Number one, heat. I'm going to relax muscles. Number two, a muscle relaxant. Maybe a little bit of a muscle relaxant might help reduce that flare. Maybe a little bit of vaginal Valium. Maybe a little bit of Tiger Balm, Pro-Serona, NeuroQuell, medical marijuana, CBD oil. Man, this is when you got to whip out what I call your IC toolkit. This is NeuroQuell. I don't know if you can see the name NeuroQuell. This was helped to develop by the Endometriosis Association. It is for pelvic pain caused by endometriosis. And it's just the oil of the calendula plant. And there's something specific about this oil that stops pain nerve transmissions. So something like this, Mel, would be very, very interesting for you to try to see if this would break through. It might be interesting to see if a little bit of azo, stocking up on a little bit of azo, you could always ask your doctor for a rescue installation, or you can ask your doctor to teach you how to do a rescue installation so that when you do have a hormone flare, you can do it at home and you won't have to call the doctor. I think learning how to self-catheterize and learning how to do that is a fabulous skill for every IC patient to have so that you're never stuck at home in pain. And the Desert Harvest is going to protect your bladder so that urine can't do it. But fundamentally, it's just more vulnerable because the estrogen levels are low there. And again, get back to those subtypes. I believe that there is a subtype in subtype 2 that relates to hormone dysfunction. Because there is a small group of patients who, when they get their hormones stabilized with whatever is used, their symptoms also improve dramatically. So we have 5 core subtypes, but there are variants within each subtypes. And I think there's a little autoimmune subtype, and there's a little hormone subtype, and there's also a little chronic infection subtype. So Mel, come on over to our website, read the self-help stuff. And I just listen, I want to, you're getting better when your normal hormonal flares improve. And that's what I noticed. I could tell I was getting better when I stopped having a flare the day that I ovulated, and or I stopped having flares before my period. That was the first concrete proof to me that my IC, my bladder, and my nervous system was healing. And so I think it's absolutely fabulous that you've done your voiding diary, you've done your pain diary, you're tracking your hormones, because knowledge is power, and you'll never, ever have to get on that runaway train with that. You know it's short term, it's going to go away, and it will probably be the first thing that goes away completely as your bladder heals and as you do better. Paula says, being upset and stressed definitely causes your bladder to flare. It's horrible. It's like we're not allowed to have feelings. We can't help how we feel with what goes on in our lives. You know, you're right. I mean, stress has a physiological reaction. So think about it this way. There are different types of stressors in our life. There are physical stressors in our life, like being exposed to something very cold. And so when you're cold, what does your body do? Your blood flow is diverted from your hands and your legs into your core. And that's why your hands start to burn and your feet start to burn and your other muscles start to get challenged. And so we know that being exposed to sudden changes in temperature are going to affect our muscles, and they're going to potentially affect our bladder. So that is a perfect example of a type of stress. Another type of stress would be driving for a long period of time, where if you're sitting in a car bouncing for hours, and worse, you're holding it and your bladder is full and you're in pain and you're bouncing. And I know some of you are wincing right now going, oh my God, yes, I'm one of those patients. So, and then of course we've got daily life stress of watching the news the last week. It's been terrifyingly brutal. That is upsetting. I have been very upset with this week by what happened to Khashoggi and the Saudi embassy in Turkey. You cannot not be affected by that story and what happened to the father of 3 children. So when you're upset, then that triggers kind of the fight or flight response. You've got higher levels of adrenaline shooting through your body that prepares you to flight or flee. That triggers anxiety, sweating, panic, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, life is hard. And there are a lot of real life stresses right now. And all you can do is make your home a sanctuary, make your bedroom a sanctuary. And you've got to work on your stress every day, in the sense that it's important to find ways to relieve it. It's important, if you're getting upset, to turn the freaking TV off or the computer off or Twitter off or whatever, and just go find your peaceful center and do your deep breathing. And if stress continues to be an issue, taking a stress management class is fabulous. God didn't give you the skills to deal with IC or Trump when you were born. We've got to learn those skills. How do you learn those skills? Well, you're either going to try to fake it on your own, or maybe why not learn from the experts by taking a class? And it can be very, very useful to just go to your local hospital and a local medical center, and there might be an opportunity for you to take a class in anxiety management, stress management that might help. Marianne, you're right. I see we lost some people when I said the T word. I'm sorry. I don't get political, but I mean, it's just really about stress. We're all stressed. Doesn't matter who you support, we're stressed. So Luana says it hurts really bad and it's not fun to have. You can't do much anymore. So Luana, your number one goal is to understand your anatomy, hon. We have to figure out what's hurting. Is it your bladder? Is it your pelvic floor? Or is it your nerve? Okay. I want you to come over to our website and I want you to watch our 5 subtypes of IC video and to see if you can subtype yourself. That's how we start. We have to understand your anatomy before we can figure out how to treat that pain. Christine, you're right. Guys, seriously, you've never worked so hard as you are right now. Seriously, it is hard to be proactive when you're in pain. You are working harder than you ever have in your life, and you should be very proud of yourselves right now because this is tough, but you're doing it, and you're doing it well. Give yourself a pat on the back. You deserve it. Practice reward therapy. Every single time you go to the doctor, seriously, do something for yourself. Reward yourself. Take a hot bath, go get a shower, read a romance novel, talk to a friend, go to a movie, whatever. Get food out, bring it home, do something to reward yourself every day. You deserve it. Tyra says, could your lower back surgeries have anything to do with your IC? Tyra, absolutely. If your lower back surgeries, if involved L4, L5, those are where the nerves for the pelvis and the bladder enter the spinal cord. So we could see some challenges with that. And the other thing we have to consider is anytime you have surgery, you are triggering muscles, and you could have residual pelvic floor, lower back muscle tension that could be contributing to your bladder wall. Patients get stuck in what I call the chicken versus the egg dilemma. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And for us, it's which comes first, the bladder or the pelvic floor. For a lot of patients, IC begins after a bladder injury like chemotherapy, right? So here's your bladder. Okay, well, here's your pelvic floor, right? Right? And we'll open it a little bit because we got a urethra going through there, right? I wonder if I can demonstrate it this way. Okay. So here's your pelvic floor. Why is this? I'm not okay. Okay, there's your pelvic floor. Kind of, sorta. Okay, kind of, sorta. And your bladder's in the middle, right? Okay, so let's see. How do I want to say this? Chicken versus the egg. So if your pain started with a bladder injury, you've got your bladder here pulsing, right? And so what do your muscles do? Your muscles cup it, your muscles hold it. It's called the guarding reflex. So we know for these patients, our therapeutic priority is to calm and soothe the bladder, because when we calm and soothe the bladder, the muscles will release and the bladder should calm down, okay? However, okay, remember, chicken and the egg. The bladder and the pelvic floor are both involved probably for all of you to some degree. But we're trying to figure out which is primary and which is secondary. So if your symptoms began after a bladder wall injury like chemotherapy, your bladder's screaming, because your bladder's screaming, your muscles are going to get tight to protect it. That's called the guarding reflex. So again, for these people, our therapeutic goal is to calm and soothe the bladder because we know that the muscles will release. However, here's your healthy bladder. And then let's just say you fall and you hurt your pelvic floor, or you have a baby. So what happens is your muscles are traumatized, right? And because they're traumatized, they get weak. And because they're weak, they cannot do the job they're doing, so they get tight. So you've got tight muscles squeezing a normal bladder. Think about it this way. Here's your hand. Put your wrist on your hand. Put your hand on your wrist and squeeze. And look, it turns white. When your muscles are tight, they restrict blood flow. So for many patients whose symptoms began after a muscle injury, you have no freaking clue you've got a muscle injury. None at all. But you've got muscles that are tight and they're squeezing your bladder. Because they're squeezing your bladder is now deprived of essential nutrients. And then your bladder wall starts to break down. And then you have symptoms of frequency urgency. So you go to the doctor with your symptoms of frequency urgency. And the doctor goes, well, you must have an infection or you must have prostatitis. Let's give you antibiotics. And you take the antibiotics and you do not respond. You go back to the doctor. The doctor goes, well, your urine's clear. You say, well, I still have frequency urgency. The doctor goes, well, maybe you've got overactive bladder, and they throw overactive bladder medications at you. You go back to the doctor a month later, 2 months later, you say, doctor, it still hurts. I'm still having problems. And the doctor goes, well, maybe you've got interstitial cystitis. Then they throw the diet at you, and then they throw Elmeron at you and other stuff at you, neuromodulation, all that sort of stuff. And the thing is you don't get better. And you go back to the doctor and you go back to the doctor, and the reality is you don't go better. And the reason why you don't get better on bladder treatments is because your fundamental problem is not your bladder. Your fundamental problem are muscles so tight, they're restricting blood flow to all the organs in the pelvis, including your rectum, including your vulva, including your prostate, all of that. So for these patients, our therapeutic priority is, in fact, to restore blood flow. And the way that we do that is we relax the muscles first with pelvic floor physical therapy. In 2008, the National Institutes of Health released their first pelvic floor physical therapy study with IC. It was a multi-center study done across the United States. They were stunned to discover that pelvic floor physical therapy was far more effective at reducing the symptoms of IC than most other treatments. Now realize, up to 2008, we thought IC was a bladder disease. And when that study came out, it threw IC on its head. Because if physical therapy worked, then we all had to go, well, wait a second. Then maybe, just maybe, IC involves muscles. And so this is why subtyping is so important. This is why when you go to the doctor, you ask for a pelvic floor assessment, because if your muscles are tight, you got to get your tush to a physical therapist and you got to do muscle work. Because if you don't do your muscle work, you're going to be tight, and your bladder cannot be healthy if your muscles are tight. You have to do the work. If you do struggle with tight pelvic floor muscles, though, and you cannot afford to go to a physical therapist, I would encourage you to go once just to have the proper assessment so that they can tell you what muscles are screwed up. Is it the levator muscles? Is it the psoas muscle? Is it the piriformis muscle? For me, it's my left piriformis muscle. If you can just go once and have that assessment, you've got a muscle name. Then when you have the muscle name, you can go to YouTube and watch the physical therapy videos. There are a lot of physical therapists on YouTube that talk about muscle rehabilitation, but you can't just say pelvic floor. You got to know the name of the muscle. I don't want you tightening muscles that are too tight. That's why you don't do Kegels when you have IC and pelvic floor dysfunction. Kegels are designed to tighten muscles. Our muscles are already too tight. Please, God, don't tighten them more. It's about relaxing muscles. But there are a couple of books that I think you should invest in. One is called, If You're a Man, Ending Male Pelvic Pain by Isa Herrera. And the other one is Ending Female Pelvic Pain by Isa Herrera. Or Heal Pelvic Pain by Amy Stein. This was written for men and women. They're all excellent. These are physical therapists who have worked with IC and pelvic pain. They have practices in New York City. But seriously, don't just sit at home and suffer. If your muscles are tight, do something about it. You got to learn about it. And these books will really help you. All right. JJ, is there anywhere online we can find that article you talked about in the magazine regarding overactive bladder? JJ, when you bought your IC membership, you should have a username and password. You just go back to our store, you log in, and you will find a link to your membership page, depending upon which membership you got. Click on that, and that will give you all of your magazines, and you'll be able to download the summer magazine and get it. So you got to log right back into that system with your username and password to get your magazine. Or if you ordered the print one, then it'll be mailed to you too. But if you just ordered the $25 one, you've got to log in to get it. And they're all there. Sabrina asks, why can you test positive for bacteria at the doctor's office, but nothing grows in culture? That's one of the challenges with dipstick tests. Dipstick tests can throw out false positives and false negatives. I often demonstrate it. In fact, my dad just used my last one this morning because he was up every 10 minutes last night. Oh, wait, here we go. So these are really good to invest in. I always have a supply of these in my house because I'm caring for 2 elderly people who are prone to having bladder infections and other issues. But for an IC patient, these are really, really useful. And of course, my dad used my sample. Let me see if there's a picture though. I have to get more samples now. Oh, and speaking of samples, if you're new, if you just logged in, the freebie that I'm giving everybody who comes to this chat is a free sample of Desert Harvest Aloe. It's just 6 capsules, but it's a good opportunity for you to see it, to touch it, to feel it, try a couple, see if your body likes this. If you would like me to send you a sample of Desert Harvest Aloe, you need to send me your name and address to my email address, which is icnetwork@mac.com. icnetwork@mac.com. And I had it written down, but I've already lost it. Alrighty. Okay, so getting back to your question, why can you test positive? So when you use a test like this, it's going to test for leukocytes and nitrites. And a positive leukocyte does not, a lot of patients think that if you have 1 out of 2 strips turn pink, you have infection. And the answer is no. You can have a positive leukocyte and not have infection. Many patients with IC flares have positive leukocytes. I've had many positive leukocytes. If you have positive nitrites, which is the bottom level, the bottom strip on these azo test strips, then yeah, those are only produced by bacteria, so you should have infection. I would be stunned if those did not grow out anything. But if you were positive for leukocytes and they sent it off for culture and it came back, that makes total sense to me. Stacy says, why does stress affect us? Is it because muscles tighten with stress? Yes, and because of adrenaline. You get a lot of adrenaline shooting through your body, and that causes a whole cascade of chemical reactions in your body. And high levels of stress actually cause nerves to release substances like substance P, which are tissue damaging and irritating. Stress has physiological reactions to it, not just emotional. It's a physiological cascade of muscle tension, adrenaline, all sorts of other things that happen when you're under stress. Paula, you're asking about the colostomy again, and that you've had some pretty dark thoughts. And I really hope that you've let your doctor know about how bad and hard it's been for you. It still comes back to your subtype, hun. We need to know what your subtype is. Because if you are IC subtype pelvic 3 and you're only doing bladder treatments, that's why you would be in so much pain. We want to really try to understand your anatomy to try to help you find the treatments that will make you feel so much better. And if you want to, listen, would you please call me tomorrow? I would love to talk to you and see if I can walk you through this and see if we can kind of create a possible plan for you about what the next steps you can take that might be able to get your pain better. I would like to make you confident instead of desperate. And I think we can do that, hun. So I'm going to give you a big hug right now. You're absolutely not alone. But there is hope, and you need to carry hope in your heart, okay? And these subtypes, are changing the playing field. Now we know why patients haven't progressed so well, because they didn't get the right treatment. And I just have to wonder if maybe that's what's going on with you too, hon. Okay. Marianne, you wish doctors and specialists were as educated as me. Thank you. Well, I go to the classes. The challenge is like the American Urology Association course this year is a fabulous class. There were 25,000 doctors at the conference, but maybe 150 took the class. You know, most doctors don't have the time. They don't go to the conferences. They can't afford to go to the conferences, or they have other interests like prostate cancer or reconstructive surgery. And so finding doctors that are really interested in chronic pelvic pain is hard. There aren't as many. It's not as exciting as treating cancer or doing surgery. I had one doctor, a fairly famous doctor at a female urologist at a very famous institution, who asked me to take her off of my doctor list because she was tired of working with chronic. She wanted to do surgery. That's what excited her as a career. And so she didn't want to be the IC doctor in that practice. She felt that was unfair. So I took her off of our list, even though she's a good doctor. She's a very good doctor. Roxanne, you had a bladder augmentation in the 80s. Now your bladder leaks and drains on its own at night. He wants to inject Botox. Yeah, a lot of patients have done Botox therapy. The real question, Roxanne, is why? Why is it leaking and draining? Is it because you've got a sphincter problem? Is it because you've got a muscle problem or a nerve dysfunction? That's the critical question that has to be asked first. Jenny says, after 8 years of tests, scope surgeries, therapy, and finally diagnosed with IC and endometriosis, holy moly, you've got pain. According to the doctors, it shouldn't be that bad. Just take some ibuprofen. Well, again, as I said before, you have to understand that doctors are taught to diagnose by observation. And if they can't see it, then it's harder for them to understand it. But the other thing you have to understand about doctors is they can only relate to you based upon the pain they've had. And so if you're seeing a doctor who has never had pelvic pain or endometrial pain or IC pain, they really don't get it. We would like for them to get it, but they don't have any personal experience to relate to it. So while they might be thinking, yeah, it's bladder pain, it shouldn't be that bad, they don't have a freaking clue what you're going through and how bad it is. And the thing is, in your case, Jenny, is you also have endometriosis. And we know that, guys, for those of you who don't know what endometriosis is, it's a migration of uterine tissue up and out the fallopian tubes into the abdomen, where it can wrap around the bowel, it can wrap around the bladder, it can go all the way up into your stomach area, it can go all over the place. And of course, the tragedy of endometriosis is that whenever you have your period, all those endometrial tissues in your belly also bleed too. And blood in the belly hurts. It's not supposed to be there. And so endometriosis has a lot of contributing factors that contribute to even higher levels of pain. Jenny, I would really want to know if the endometriosis has attached to your bladder or has wrapped around your bladder in some way. We have seen that consistently in some patients with endometriosis. And if that's the case, then getting that treated is going to be important, because again, we've got muscles that wrap, but then imagine endometrial tissue wrapping in there too and making knots and stuff like that. It's brutal. It can be brutal. I hope that you're a member of the Endometriosis Association. You need to Google Endometriosis Association. They have an amazing website. I've interviewed the executive director. The executive director did a big article on it in our magazine a couple years ago. One of the things that they are really hot on is removing toxic chemicals from your home, because we now know that endometriosis has been linked to several chemicals. Probably 24 chemicals, well, I don't know if that's the exact number, but it's like every year a new chemical has been found to trigger endometriosis. These are chemicals that are estrogen mimickers. The worst is dioxin. And so the Endometriosis Association is really big on removing any and all toxic chemicals out of your home. And I have a section of that on our website because I believe that that's very true for IC too. And so come over to our website, go to our self-help area and read that. Okay. Marianne says, can you sign up for coaching in Australia? Yes, the answer is you can. I have been known to do coaching at midnight my time to make it work for you. We can do it by Skype, provided that the internet is cooperating. Hello, Kentucky. Hello, Kim. Jen says, if IC is diagnosed by cystoscope, do other things need to be ruled out too? I had blood in my urine, had a scope. I was diagnosed with IC. No, in between, I had a hydrodistension. Generally, they are always going to rule out other things, especially if you've got visible blood in your urine. And one of the things that they should always rule out is bladder cancer, because if you were a smoker, smoking is the #1 cause of bladder cancer. And bladder cancer can make the bladder wall bleed, as well as cause symptoms of frequency urgency. They do that with a test called a urine cytology test. You just pee in a cup and you send it off. And so the odds are you've all already had that done. It's normally a routine part of the screening. However, it is, I absolutely believe that I had cancer when I was diagnosed. My pain was so intense to the point that I demanded exploratory surgery. I told them, I don't believe you. I believe that I have cancer and I want you to look. And they looked and they did not find cancer. But I'm one of those people that I worry. I think about it over and over and kind of obsess about it. They call it ruminating, where you can't stop thinking about it. And I couldn't stop thinking about cancer that first year. And so I finally just said, test me for cancer. I can't do this anymore. So I would ask for a urine cytology test. Why not? Just get it done. The good news about bladder cancer is it's considered one of the easiest cancers to treat with the highest survival and success rates. Marianne. What about recurring UTIs caused by IC? IC does not cause recurring UTIs at all in any way, shape, or form. What would cause recurring UTI is either estrogen atrophy or the presence of what we would call a fastidious chronic infection, an infection deep in your bladder wall, a bacterial infection or a fungal infection that is difficult to isolate and grow. So you are the perfect candidate if you are having recurring bladder infections over and over and over. You are the perfect candidate for next generation urine testing. And I have a slide on this here. This is perfect. If you come over to bladderhealth.org, you can learn about it. What you do is you send a little bit of urine. They send you a kit. You send it off to have your urine studied for DNA. It will isolate every piece of DNA in your bladder from an organism. You could have a bacteria. You could have a beneficial bacteria. You could have a pathogenic bacteria, or you could have a fungus like Candida in your urine. This will isolate 99% more bacteria than traditional urine culture. So this is exactly when next generation urine testing should be done. And that is when you have recurring UTIs. But the other thing you've got to find out is your skin estrogen atrophied? If you struggle with, if you're menopausal and your skin is thin, then your bladder and your vagina and your vulva and your urethra cannot defend themselves as well from infection because you don't have that estrogen-driven mucus layer, and this is a good example. So normally this blue is your normal mucus, because remember, your bladder is like your mouth. It is a hollow organ covered with mucus. And so you've got 3 layers. You've got a layer of mucus, then you've got a layer of superficial cells, and then underneath that, you've got blood vessels, nerves, and stuff. Normally, this mucus is thick and robust. When you're young and you have lots of estrogen, you have lots of mucus. When you're older, you have much less estrogen, therefore you have less mucus. So what happens is the irritants in urine reach your cells. But not only the irritants in urine like acid, but also bacteria. Now bacteria have a direct entree to the cells that they're going to infect. So normally, if you're menopausal, they would also give you an estrogen product, an estrogen cream to use so that your body can produce a little bit more mucus as a protective vehicle. Okay. Robin says she tried Mirbatrix and it made her sick and she had a hard time peeing. That's not surprising. We all tend to be pretty funky with medications. Paula, call me tomorrow, hon. You say that diet modification has not helped you at all, then that tells me that your bladder wall might not be your dominant problem. It might be a nerve or it might be a muscle. I'm just going through your questions, guys. If you've got questions, go ahead and ask them up. Let me check YouTube down here real quick. All right, we're good on YouTube. Let's go back to Facebook. Stacy says you're nervous about having a hydrodistension. Don't be nervous, because we don't do the hydros the way we used to do it. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they were high pressure, long duration. Now they're low pressure, short duration. And they're much less traumatic. I had one last year. I had no problems with it at all, although they should always be done in the operating room under usually something like propofol, a very quick, very gentle anesthetic that wears off really quickly. So if you are going to have a hydrodistension, you want to have a low pressure, short duration hydrodistension that is much less traumatic to the bladder. That is industry standard. That is medical standard today. We don't do high pressure distensions anymore. So they're much easier now. Jen says, how do we know what type of IC you have? Hon, you just got to read our subtype area, watch our subtyping video, and that will give you a good head start on what you might have. It's pretty easy to subtype yourself based upon your symptoms. I also have a lot of articles on it in our magazine, the IC Optimist. And so if you're a member of the IC Network, you can go back and look at those original articles which talked about subtyping. Hi, Erin. Tina says, since I've had IC for the last 5 years, you've had nerve problems in your feet. And so I would wonder if you have sciatica and or very tight muscles that are squeezing those nerves, causing those foot issues. That is the posttibial nerve, which is a neuromodulation target, and or potentially sciatica. Aaron says, is IC progressive? Will we get worse? The answer is no. Usually IC is not progressive. And as we look at those subtypes, that makes more sense. The patients who are the most challenged are the patients who have untreated Hunner's lesions. That is incredibly challenging. And that means that there's a lot of inflammation in the bladder, a lot of pain. And that certainly can get worse over time if Hunner's lesions aren't treated correctly, and or if that patient is not following the IC diet and trying to protect their bladder. And that's true for IC subtype 2 also. Latisse says she would love to hear an in-depth discussion of microgen testing. It is marketed to IC patients, but finding a doctor who understands it is virtually impossible. That is very true because it is very new. However, interestingly, the MAP Research Network, which is the IC Research Network from the National Institutes of Health, has been using next generation testing for years. And that's how they have made big breakthroughs in our understanding of IC and the bladder biome. If you go over to bladderhealth.org, we have an interview, a brief interview with the CEO, but in our summer magazine, we have a much more in-depth interview with the CEO of Microgen that will give you much more information on it. Doctors are still unsure what to do with it. You know, they don't have any experience with it. They've been trained by rote to do urinalysis, and they don't unless they're an infectious disease doctor working with really complicated infections, they just might not have experience with this. This is really, infectious disease doctors do this all the time. Bringing this to a urology community is fairly new, but becoming more and more important, especially as we have more drug-resistant bladder infections coming down the pipeline. Tyra, sounds like you're signing up for pelvic floor PT. Good. Marianne, she had a tummy tuck and she tightened your muscles a lot. Could your pelvic floor muscles have been influenced and triggered by that? Maybe. We see that sometimes also in patients who have prolapse surgery, where they are, either they're using a mesh or they're using your own natural tissue to repair a vaginal prolapse. And sometimes they tighten it too tight and they have to go back in and release it. And so that would be a very interesting question, would be to maybe work with a physical therapist, see if they think your muscles are unusually tight and kind of go from there. Tamara, she's going to physical therapy for 8 weeks and you're a new person. Wow, highly recommend it. I love hearing that, my dear. That's wonderful. Robin says, are these oils listed on our website? Yes, they are actually in our store on our website. We sell them. During a flare, why do the tops of my thighs hurt so bad? Hun, that is referred muscle tension. Your muscles in your pelvis are tight, and you've got muscles in your upper leg that actually move right up into your pelvis. And so that's all a sign of tight pelvic floor muscles, in my opinion, Mary. Deanna says she's having Elmeron installation. She's having side effects after just 3 treatments. Have you heard much about this? Well, he's right that less Elmeron gets into the bloodstream when you just have it as an installation because you pee it out. However, there is a little bit of absorption into your bloodstream. The question is, what side effects are you having? That's really interesting. I completely believe you. I would guess that your side effects might be easy bruising from the Elmeron, or diarrhea, or stomach upset. And if you are having that, then maybe what he needs to do is switch to heparin instead of Elmeron. He needs to respect the fact that it's not working for you, or that you're worse afterwards. Marianne, why do the nerves in the upper thigh hurt so bad? Because their muscles are squeezing those nerves, most likely. Pam asks, she's going to have a hydrodistension in early December. What questions should you be asking your urologist before that test? Number 1, method. What method are they going to use? that needs to be a low pressure, short duration hydrodistension. And it was the American Urology Association who suggested that back in 2011. They no longer recommend high pressure hydrodistensions. It needs to be a low pressure, short duration hydrodistension. That's number one. Number two, the question should be, what plan, if any, does he have to treat anything that he finds? So if he goes in and looks at your bladder and finds Hunner's lesions, he or she needs to be prepared to treat it at that time. It is a great tragedy to not treat Hunner's lesions at that time, because you will eventually need another one to treat them correctly. So question number two is, how will you be treating anything that you find? And that's an important discussion to have. The third important discussion to have is about pain care. Because hydrodistensions have remarkably individual reactions. There are some people who literally go out to dinner that night and they're fine. And there are other people who have hydros who literally lay in bed for a week because their pain hurts. I think it's important. Well, this is me, okay? And I did this before my hysteroscopy last year and DNC last year, before my hysterectomy last year. I just flat out refused to have any test without pain medicine. I just told them flat out, you're not touching me without pain meds. I need a prescription in my hand before you will go in and touch my body in a way that I know will hurt it. And God, I know that that's controversial, but hydrodistension is literally one of the most traumatic things you can do to your bladder. And I think that not having pain medicine would be pretty much a deal breaker for me. God, I feel real awkward saying that. I believe that you need to have your doctor looked at. I believe that doctors need to look at your bladder. But I would be working with a doctor who will treat you for pain. You don't need a month's worth of pain medicine, man, but you might need a couple of days worth of pain medicine. And I literally would demand the prescription at my pre-op rather than wait for it as I'm walking out of the hospital after the hydro, because I don't want to risk going home without pain meds. And so I'm real assertive about that. Myself. In terms of scheduling, I would not want to have it done the day before he goes on vacation. I would not want to have it done on a Friday. I would want to have it done on a Monday or Tuesday. So if you experience any post-op complications, you know that he'll be there to take your questions and to see you. I think that that's also important too. And understand that, again, people's reactions to hydrodistensions are very different. I really hope you're going to be one of those people where you're absolutely fine afterwards. But sometimes you might think you might be able to go back to work that day or the next day, and that's just not real. I would be prepared to take at least a week off after a hydro. And if you can go back earlier, that's great. But if you can't, I would be really sad for you to try to go back to work with your bladder screaming. Okay. I hope that kind of helped. I don't want to scare you about the pain. I mean, remember, I'm an old timer. I mean, I was diagnosed 25 years ago, and 25 years ago, these tests were agonizing. They were agonizing because they stretched the bladder so badly. They don't do that anymore. They should not do that anymore. So my pain experience from early on should be very different from your pain experience. But I have a little bit of PTSD because of that, and which is why I'm pretty assertive about pain meds. That's like I tell the doctor, listen, I'm not asking for 30 pills. Give me 5 pills. I'm going to cut them in quarters. But I want to make sure that if I'm in pain, I get help for that pain. I don't want to be up all night, the night of my hydro, hurting, period. Done. End of story. Brenda says, if you're about 2 years, see, I don't know. I'm at comment 159 and there's 30 after that. So I know some of you have answered these. If you're about 2 years into menopause, can you still have endo? Could you still have had it prior to stopping your periods? Yeah, girl. I mean, once you got endo growing, it's always there. It's there. It doesn't magically go away. You still have that endometrial tissue and those adhesions in your body. And yes, you're not having periods and they're not bleeding, but that doesn't mean that they're still not impeding and impairing function in some way. Can endometriosis cause problems with IC and muscle tight and constipation? Can it cause problems with IC and muscle tightness? Muscle tightness is absolutely linked to constipation because, again, here's your pelvic floor and you've got two tubes coming out of your pelvic floor. You've got a urethra and a rectum. And if your muscles are tight, it's hard to pee and it's hard to have a bowel movement. If you're one of those patients where you're sitting on your toilet 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds before you can pee, that means your muscles are tight and you're waiting for them to relax. And that's a very simplistic example, but that works. So muscle tension is absolutely linked to constipation and to bladder pain. Lauren, have you heard of anything about issues with IC flares after weight loss surgery? Yes, you could be flaring from the anesthesia, from any chemicals that you were exposed to during the surgery could certainly cause a bladder wall flare. And also remember, anytime you have surgery, you are traumatizing muscles in those areas. Muscles and nerves are being traumatized, and you're always going to have a period of surgical recovery where muscles are healing and nerves are calming down. Cheryl says, why would I get a bladder spasm when I first get in a hot tub of bath water? Well, you know, as I was explaining before, sudden changes in temperature kind of are shocking to the body, whether it's super cold or super hot. Maybe it's too hot. Maybe that's triggering. You know, it's kind of like when you stick your finger in hot water, you pull it right out. Well, maybe what your bladder's saying, it's so hot, it's shaking, it's spasming because it's just too hot. I don't know. I would play with your water temperature a little bit. Janine says you have scleroderma, IC and Raynaud's syndrome. You get Botox. Doctor wants to try bladder installations with lidocaine. I'm nervous. I don't know why you would be nervous. Rescue installations with heparin and lidocaine are really the most popular therapy around the world. They're called a rescue for a reason. They rescue you out of flare. It's normally when you have a rescue installation, your pain goes away. You're pain-free for 6 to 8 hours afterwards because the lidocaine has numbed your bladder. So, you know, rescue instills are really a vital therapy for people with IC subtype 2 bladder while driven. I wouldn't be afraid of it. I think I'd talk to your doctor about your worries and concerns. And you know, there are some patients who are lidocaine sensitive, and so they switch to Marcaine, and you won't know until you try it. Okay. Somebody's asking, what is the phone number again? This is the phone number, my friends, 1-800-928-7496. ic-network.com. Justin says, is cyclobenzaprine okay for a flare? Cyclobenzaprine is perfectly okay for a pelvic floor flare because cyclobenzaprine is a muscle relaxant, and that is what I use when I have pelvic floor tension. I used it last week. I never take a lot of it because it can be sedating. It's not a medication you want to take like candy, that's for sure. I take a quarter of a pill when I'm feeling muscle tension at night. There is a better muscle relaxant for if you need to be alert. It is called baclofen. It does not have a sedative effect. And so that's better for daytime flares. Cyclobenzaprine in a very, very small amount might be better for use at nighttime. At least that's when I use it. You can't drive when you're taking cyclobenzaprine, also known as Flexeril. Jen, your hydrodistension was done in the office with no medication, very painful. I hope that wasn't recent because the American Urology Association says it should be done in an outpatient surgical center. I also had a hydrodistension with no medication, and I got a doctor fired for it. Really. It was a radiologist who absolutely refused to ignored my urologist's instructions on how to do a test, and she gave me a massive hydrodistension, and yeah, got her fired. She deserved it. It was cruel. When you have one of the things that I think is relevant whenever you're going to have a test like that, whether you're having a urodynamics in the doctor's office or something else that involves the bladder in the doctor's office, is I think it's important to negotiate a safe word where you say before the doctor, say, okay, doc, listen, I'm willing to give you a shot, but as soon as I say spaghetti, I'm telling you I'm done and you need to stop. With a urodynamics test, what they do, they're testing nerve functionality and how your nervous system is working. So what they do is they slowly fill your bladder with fluid, and then they say, tell us when you first feel the need to pee. When do you first feel that need to pee? And then you go, okay, now. And then they keep filling it. And then they'll say, tell us when you first feel discomfort or pain. And you say, okay, now. And okay. And then what they do is they push past that a little bit. They want to see what your waking bladder capacity is. And that's when you're going, oh, hell, stop. It hurts. And I think that that's the point where you have to have had a pretty firm discussion with your doctor about what your safe word is. And the minute you're at that point where you are in deep distress, they need to respect that and stop that rather than push past that. That's how I feel about that. Now, I can't give you medical advice. I'm not a doctor, but that's kind of, I've had that test done twice. And I think you have to be very verbal and you have to be very clear and say, I'm done. Stop. It hurts too much. And I think that they need to respect that. Shanae says, what should be done for EDS patients? You have to refresh my memory on what EDS stands for. You're being put under general sedation for your bladder stretching on Monday. Okay, so Shanae, low pressure, short duration. It should be very quick, and you should have had a discussion about what else they will do if they find anything. Lauren says, have you heard of freeze-dried aloe vera capsules helping with IC? And the answer is yes. Desert Harvest Aloe. And we are giving free samples away right now. If you send me your name and email address, I will send you this professional sample so that you can at least see it and touch it and smell it and all that sort of stuff. You need to send your mailing address to icnetwork@mac.com, and I will send these out to you. Anyway, this company is the only supplement company that did a double-blind placebo-controlled study to determine if their product helps symptoms with IC. These are very expensive research studies. They're considered the best research studies you can do, and that study did indeed show that Desert Harvest Aloe reduced the symptoms of IC for some, but not all patients. Aaron says, if you aren't food sensitive, you should still follow the diet. Remember the chicken versus the egg. Okay, so you're going to have bladder wall and you're going to have muscle issues. If your pelvic floor muscles are tight, that's affecting the health of your bladder. It's very hard for your bladder to be super healthy if you've got poor blood flow. So I think you have to act to protect your bladder anyway, but I don't think you need to be over the top about it. If you're drinking coffee, I would do decaf coffee. I would avoid artificial sugars. I would still try to protect your body. I mean, listen, the foods that we're exposed to in 2018 are what's the right word? A shadow of what they were 50 years ago. They are so chemically adulterated now. And so a simple, fresh, healthy diet that everybody should be doing anyway for your own nutrition, avoiding the junk food, avoiding the fast food, and just trying to create an environment that supports your health. So in other words, I'm saying you can't go back on drinking soda every day. I think that that's just foolish. And I don't think that that's healthy in the long run for not only your bladder, for other parts of your body. Holy hell, Christine, you have been through, you sound very similar to me, as a matter of fact. So Christine was diagnosed with endometriosis, had a cyst rupture. I've had multiple cyst rupture, laparoscopy, me too, cystoscopy, me too, diagnosed with IBS, me too, hysterectomy, me too, diagnosed with a degenerative disc disease, not me, spinal fusion, not me, although I do have scoliosis, diagnosed with fibro, anxiety, and depression. You were using an estrogen gel 3 years ago. Should I go back on estrogen? Well, hon, that's a discussion for your doctor. And it really depends upon the quality and health of your skin. If your skin is dry and estrogen atrophy down on your vulva, in your vagina, then we also have to assume that that process is happening in your urethra and your bladder. So using a little bit of an estrogen cream vaginally at the entrance to your urethra might be reasonable and should not carry the same risks as if you were taking an oral estrogen. That's why I got uterine cancer last year. I'd only taken estrogen for a couple of years, and I ended up the only person in my family ever having a hormone cancer, and leave it to me, it was me. So I do believe that there are tremendous dangers to taking systemic hormones. However, using a topical hormone is believed to carry much less risk. It's so funny. Whenever I do these, my head itches. My head doesn't itch any other time. I don't know why. It's how my body's manifesting the stress of this. I don't know. It's funny. Life is weird. Life is very weird. Before my interstim, Cheryl says, before my interstim, I had constant pain. Now I have flares if I eat the wrong foods usually or after sex. The burning is so bad. I describe it as not being able to get away from the pain. Was hospitalized, given morphine, didn't touch it. So Cheryl, again, it kind of depends upon the type of flare and the type of pain you're having. I mean, I would really want to know, based upon your high pain level, I would really want to know if you perchance have some untreated Hunner's lesions, because Hunner's lesions would not respond to interstim therapy. There's got to be a physiological, anatomical reason why you're having such intense pain. And burning, now, also know that interstim can malfunction and cause burning. So that would be the other thing I would want to know is there any chance that interstim is malfunctioning? If you want to call, I hope you'll call me sometime this week or maybe next week. I'd love to hear more about your pain, and it'd be really interesting to see if we could correlate that in some way with your interstim. I don't know. I don't know. So Amy just gave the perfect example. Her first hydrodistension, she was in pain for 3 weeks. Her second one, different doctor, she was fine hours later. That's all about doctor technique. Deanna is saying she has hair loss, stomach upset with constant diarrhea after Elmaron installations. Well, girl, I think that what that means is you are Elmaron intolerant, my friend. So that might not be the medicine for you. If a medicine interferes with your quality of life and makes your quality of life worse, then usually that's a time to look for other medicine. And it would be very interesting, Deanna, if you're focusing on a bladder coating, maybe to try the supplements first. I mean, that's what the AUA says anyway. So supplements are in step 1. The installations and the oral meds are in step 2. So it would be very interesting to try maybe Cystoprotec or Cystorenew or Desert Harvest Aloe to see if those would coat your bladder without causing the stomach upset. They're not linked to hair loss. They can cause a little tiny bit of loose bowel, but you start slow and work your way up. So Karen says, your new urologist tells you they stretch it to the point that it could burst? Oh, hell no. No, not anymore. They should not be doing that anymore. That is insane. Anytime you stretch the bladder, you are risking bladder rupture. So if you happen to have a small bladder and they're not paying attention and they fill it up, yeah, they could rupture your bladder, but that's an odd thing for a doctor to be saying to you, in my opinion. Odd, unusual. I mean, rupture is possible anytime with the bladder, but if he's saying they deliberately stretch it to the point where it could almost burst, woo, I wouldn't be that confident in that doctor. Kim says to please post suicide hotline numbers for IC patients to call. On Facebook, guys, you can search for suicide resources and it will give you all of the numbers that you need. We also have a page that talks about that on our website that also has all of those phone numbers. But Facebook has its own unique system that can be very helpful. If you ever encounter anybody on Facebook who is mentioning suicide or kind of going in that direction, you need to report that post immediately to their suicide intervention team. Do it. It's important. And I will tell you, I'm going to be perfectly honest here. I myself have called, if I have a patient, I had a patient on America Online back in the old days who was very suicidal. And I was on the phone for hours with America Online, asking them to find that patient to make sure that they were okay. I have even, if I know the person I'm talking to and I know who they are and I know where they live and their phone number and they're suicidal, it is my duty and obligation to get a welfare check out to them because I don't want them to die. I want them to get help that they need. So the suicide hotline numbers are really, really important. And that Facebook suicide referral system is really, really important. So use it. Christine says she was given no pain meds for hydro 30 years ago. Yeah, I know, girl. Absolutely. You know, and Christine, that's specifically mentioned in the American Urology Association IC guidelines. They recognize and understand that their treatment of IC patients 30 years ago was so traumatic that patients never went back. And they're trying to fix that with the new guidelines. They do not want patients traumatized anymore because you were traumatized. I was traumatized. My two co-leaders who's helped me start IC Redwood Empire, my first support group leader, were terribly traumatized by the way they were treated. So we're really trying to stop that and fix that. Rimso is one of the early treatments for IC. It's pretty much fallen out of favor. It's a byproduct of the wood pulp industry. It comes from, do I know it? No, it's just a byproduct of the paper industry. It's now coming from China. There's pretty deeply concerning issues about some of the unlabeled DMSO coming from China. If you're ever going to do it, it needs to be brand name. It's called Rimso, RIMSO 50. You should never do anything but Rimso, and it is normally done in cocktail form. It has a lot of different methods of action. You can read about it on our website, but just know that many patients who do Rimso feel worse afterwards. I had 8 Rimso treatments, did nothing for me. One of the worst things I did was try to drive home with Rimso in my bladder. I did, and I was a lunatic by the time I got home. You generally hold it for 20, 30 minutes, you pee it out, and then you go home. But again, it's one of those treatments where you feel worse before you feel better. And that's one of the reasons why it's fallen out of favor, because with a heparin lidocaine installation, you feel better. You feel better right away. And that's our goal here. Karen, you say you're still waiting for a call from me. You know, Karen, I do believe that I called you. I make notes on all my calls. So pop me an email and let's try to connect up again, because I'm pretty religious on going back and checking through this, because I don't want people waiting. Here it is right here. Here's my note for you. You know what? I'll put it at the top. I'm going to leave it on the top and I'll try to call you tomorrow. Okay. I might even be able to call you tonight, hon. After we're done. Well, no, probably not, because I gotta fix dinner for my parents. Marianne is struggling with lower back cramping pain as low as the hip and back area. Some doctors are diagnosing kidney infection and give you antibiotics, but it keeps coming back. So, Marianne, the question is it bacterial or is it muscle? We don't know. You don't know. This is why you would do something like this. Get your urine tested with next generation DNA testing, and that will tell you once and for all if you have a kidney infection or a bladder infection. If this comes back negative, then you're dealing with a muscle or a back thing. Robin says, DMSO is supposed to renew the cells in the bladder. Not really. Not really. DMSO was really never positioned to, quote, renew cells. It's more of it affects mast cells. It affects nerves. It's a deep penetrator. It has lots of different effects, but I've never heard the word renew. If you have a source for that, I'd like to see that. I actually interviewed the guy who wrote the FDA approval for DMSO. Karen, thank you for your prayers. That's so sweet. One of the most touching moments I ever had. I knew I was on to doing the right thing when I had a minister and his wife call, and his wife had IC, and they had the whole church pray for me, and I was so touched. I think I just cried for a day afterwards. But it's good for the soul to help other people. That's why I do it. Cheryl says, I had Hunter's ulcers when first diagnosed. They did nothing to treat them. Went to a neuro-gyn. She said I was horribly inflamed, but no Hunter's lesions. You know, Cheryl, that's one of the things that we consistently see in the United States is some doctors really don't know how to diagnose Hunter's lesions correctly. And so you really may never have had them. Or the second doctor may have missed them. We don't have a lot of good standards on training doctors on how to recognize Hunter's lesions quite yet. We have videos on them. If you are watching a video or she has a video of your test, the way you know you have a Hunter's lesion is that it bleeds. It as soon as you start stretching the bladder, they call it a waterfall effect. It bleeds profusely. That's what a lesion does. So if you've got pictures of your bladder and it's just covered with blood, then yeah, you have a Hunter's lesion. But if you've got pictures of your bladder that are more like this, more like red spots, then that's more the bladder wall injury type of thing. Kayla had a doctor say, well, the next step is a hydrodistension, but I will have to Google it because I don't remember how to do the procedure. Was he joking? Ooh, okay, that's not good. He must have been joking. That's crazy. They wouldn't Google it. They'd go to maybe a medical website or go to their textbook, but holy moly, that's scary. JJ, that's called a urodynamics test. Karen says the doctor wants to do Rimso, so I'm not against the use of Rimso. I mean, it might be an interesting experiment. Rimso is fallen out of favor, but there are still some doctors who do it who believe that it has a place in the IC treatment, in the IC treatment model or the IC treatment paradigm. I would just want to make sure that it was done as part of a DMSO cocktail with other things in it, like a steroid injection, maybe an steroid and antibiotic. I just put on our website a whole bunch of cocktail formulas, both rescue and not, that were published by IC doctors. So you can look at those and ask him what he proposes to do. A straight DMSO, a straight 50-50 DMSO really should not be done based upon urologist discussions at the meetings that I've been at. They believe that the straight 50-50 can cause irreversible muscle spasm. So the consensus at the meeting that I was at where they talked about it was it should be at about a 25% dosage. And the way you accomplish that is by doing it in a cocktail with some other ingredients. All righty. Hey, Robin, do you, I'm not sure if you're in Canada or not. The company in Germany called Bioniche stopped supplying the DMSO. You know, I've heard more and more about this. I've heard that Cystitis was discontinued and that Rimso 50 was discontinued in Canada. I don't know if it was been discontinued in the United States. I don't know. If you're in the United States and you have that info, would you please send it to me? I've tried to get that info. I just haven't had a lot of time to go down that pathway. Yeah, Donna, I agree. They were always painful for me, and they made me worse too. Karen, on YouTube, the email for the Desert Harvest Atlas sample is icnetwork@mac.com. icnetwork@mac.com. I only have a certain number, so get it while the getting's good. All right, my friends, listen, if you found this support group meeting helpful, I hope that you will support us and become a member of the IC Network so that you can get our wonderful magazine, the IC Optimist. You can see I've referred to it many times. This is where we do in-depth reporting on IC. I can tell you that the lead story for our fall issue is the Elmeron eye problem. I have other articles in the pipeline, including a Social Security disability, improving sleep quality, things like that. Those are going to be in our fall magazine. You can do that by coming over to our website and just clicking on the membership link and or going into our shop. If you don't want to become a member, you can buy individual copies. But you can also make a donation to the IC Network. It would be very much appreciated. There's no paywall on the IC Network. It's free. It always has been free. My intention is that it always will be free, but we really do need help paying for writers and internet and servers and all that sort of stuff. And that's where your memberships go. I always end these meetings with last call for questions, but I always end these meetings with the same message, and that is, you have done nothing wrong. You are not to blame. I don't want you carrying any shame. I don't want you carrying any blame because you have IC. You are no different than with somebody who is hit by a car. You have been hurt. You are injured. And just as if somebody in your family was hit by a car, you would give them love and support. You, my friend, deserve exactly the same thing. You deserve the love and the support of your family and friends. IC does not change your ability to love your partner. It does not change your heart. It does not change your soul. It does not change your ability to be a mother, to be a daughter, to be a sister, or be a friend. It does not change your ability to be a father or a son or a brother or a friend. IC is below the waist, and I want you to keep it below the waist. You know, The moment that changed my life was when I had a doctor say to me that I would forever be a burden on my family. And this was in 1993. I had been suffering for a year with agonizing bladder pain, and I did not know what to do. I could not sleep. I lost my job. I lost my health insurance. Believe me, I was living on credit cards. I know what it's like. And one day at the emergency room, I had a doctor say to me, an arrogant prick of a doctor say to me, "You will forever be a burden on your family." And that was the moment I woke up. And that was the moment I fought back. And I said to him, "Wait a second. I still have 3 college degrees. I still have my hands. I still have my brains. I still have my leg. I'm going to prove you wrong, you son of a bitch." And I did. I started my first support group 2 months later from my bed. I started the IC Network a year after that. The IC Network was my class project for a class on the first web programming class ever offered in Northern California. I took at night with IC, driving in the car. Who knew my little class project 25 years later would still be the #1 in the world, recognized by Harvard Medical School and the University of London? I say that for a reason. Now listen, I know some of you right now are thinking that you're worthless. You're thinking you can't do anything. You're thinking that you're going to be stuck in your home for the rest of your life. You're depressed, you're frustrated, you're anxious. I respect that. I understand that. I have been there. But you can't be passive. You have to be active. You have to fight for your life. You have to fight for your medical care. How do you do that? You do that by education. Okay? I need you to do 3 things every single day. I don't want you to do one big giant thing because you're going to get overloaded. I want you to do 3 little things every single day. I want you to do for 15 minutes something for your soul, something that gives your soul comfort. Whether it is hugging a redwood tree or listening to your favorite minister or me, Joel Osteen, or reading a poem or talking to whatever, do something that gives your spirit comfort. 15 minutes a day. Walking it, loving on a kitten, playing with your pet, whatever. You need and deserve comfort. I want you to do something for 15 minutes every day for your body, for your bladder. Whether it's saying no to that cup of coffee that you're thinking about down at Starbucks, damn it, it's pumpkin spice latte season and I really want it because I write really well when I have it right here at my desk. I do. I think about it almost every day, but I don't do it. I try not to do it. I don't give in to the craving. So whether it's doing your pelvic floor work, sitting on a ball to relax your pelvic floor, or calling a doctor and making an appointment, do something for you, okay? Do something for your health. Buying something organic, making something good, making something that's IC friendly. Little thing, 15 minutes. And then 15 minutes a day, I want you to read 1 article on my website. 1. And I'm telling you, at the end of that year, at the end of 3 months, you'll probably be more informed than your doctor on IC based upon just reading our website, okay? So how do you take your life back? You take it back 1 day at a time, sometimes 1 minute at a time, and you build your skills. Comfort your soul, refresh your soul. IC does not change your humanity. You are here for a reason. The world needs you. Your family needs you. We need you. Okay? And so don't carry this heavy burden and load because it's not fair to you and it's not fair to the people around you. You are a good person and you deserve love and care, and it has to come from you first. So when that doctor said to me, "You will forever be a burden on your family," that's when I started fighting back. And that's when I started getting better. And 25 years later, I'm doing really damn good compared to where I was before. And I believe that can happen to you too. Okay? So carry hope in your heart, my friends. And if you ever need a pep talk, you know who to call. And if I'm here, I would love to give you that pep talk and give you perhaps a different way of looking at it, or helping you brainstorm, or helping you prepare for an appointment, or whatever. If I can help you, I really want to try to help you. All righty. All right, my good friends. I need to go fix dinner for my 95-year-old dad and 90-year-old mom. My day is incorporated thoroughly in their lives, so I've got to say goodbye. All right, be well. Have a wonderful day, wonderful evening, great weekend. It's fall. Enjoy it. I hope you have a great Halloween. Our next meeting actually is this Sunday. I'll be doing another live support group meeting. Well, if it's the third Sunday, is it? Let me hold on. Let me look. Is it the third Sunday? 1, 2, 3. Yes. So we will be doing another live support group meeting on Sunday. You can bring your family and friends. If anybody has any questions, I am happy to take them. Let me just see, do one quick really thing. Marilyn says, IC is not controlling me. I control it. Awesome. Good job, girl. Good job. Marianne says, I just want to be normal again. Okay. It's possible. Marianne, call me. We can talk. Okay, guys. See you later. Have a good one. Last call, Facebook. Thank you, Karen. Last call, YouTube. Facebook is shut down. Very, very nice to see you guys. I wish you well.